Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Well, I wonder if in the inner earth, Tim, we could hear the lightning and thunder like we do outside here on the outer surface. And Tim, good evening there in Indiana. How you doing this week?
I'm doing all right, Tim. And, according to Edgar Rice Burroughs' Pellucidar books, the inner earth had their own monstrous storms with lightning that would stretch from one side to the other. So, yeah, I bet you they could hear it.
Well, when I was growing up, of course, some people might say I've never grown up, but when I was growing up, one of my favorite books was Journey to the Center of the Earth. Well, actually, movies. I don't know as if I ever made it all the way through the book, but the movie starring Pat Boone, I must have seen it 2 or 3 times. And I know there's a more recent version that's been on television on one of the cable channels, and it's nowhere near as good as the original. But then normally, most films that are remade like that aren't. But it's always a subject, I know, the inner earth and the hollow earth. It's always been a subject that has fascinated me, and I know it's also fascinated you, Tim. In fact, the first book that I ever had published by Gray Barker's Caesarean Press was called The Shaver Mystery and the Inner Earth. Now, that book, I think we're talking about 1966 or something like that. That book has gone through maybe 20 different editions or printings. It's now called Subterranean Worlds Inside Earth, and it has been reprinted in several languages, including Japanese and Korean. I was quite surprised one day when I got a call from somebody who said that they had a publishing outfit in Korea and that the inner earth was of particular interest to people there. And so we cut a deal, and they published the book in Korean. And I don't know, it's always a subject. I can't say, if you ask me, well, do I believe that the earth is hollow? Well, I don't know. You could flip a coin on that one. But I think we have to separate two different things. The world being hollow, we talk about a central sun and a land where you could enter inside the North and the South Pole. Now, you've written a couple of books about Admiral Byrd's supposed journey inside the hollow earth, right, Tim?
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, there was the original, what was it, the Secret Diaries of Admiral Byrd, which which actually I think was disinformation that came out to try to distract away from his Operation High Jump project in 1947. So, I mean, what better way to, make people think that the whole subject is really crazy, whatever was going on with Operation High Jump in Antarctica, is then to attach it to something like, UFOs in the North Pole with swastikas and kindly inner Earth space brothers, kidnapping Byrd and delivering him that message.
I believe there were giants in the Earth. Wasn't the entrance of the pole supposedly guarded by giant super beings?
Well, like the Nephilim.
But now, the first time I ever, I guess, outside of a Journey to the Center of the Earth, was in an old pulp magazine. Well, I guess probably it was Fate magazine. But there was a fellow who we both know and have read quite a bit of the literature that he's written over the years, Richard Shaver. Now, Richard Shaver's take on the inner Earth is a little bit different than that of Admiral Byrd and others like Raymond Bernard, who claim that the Earth is actually hollow. Richard Shaver claimed that he had actually visited a vast cavern system that existed below our very feet, unbeknownst to most of the world's population. And I remember growing up, I was probably about 10 or 11 years old, and tuning into the old Long John Nebel show on WOR radio out of New York. And Long John had, of course, had the first show on the Offbeat and the Paranormal. And one evening he had on Ray Palmer, who was the original publisher of Fate magazine and later published Flying Saucers from Other Worlds, Search magazine, Forum, but had started out in the 1940s as editor-in-chief of Amazing Stories. Now, Amazing Stories was a monthly science fiction magazine published out of Chicago by Ziff Davis. Unbeknownst, however, to the publishers, Palmer decided to publish a series of manuscripts submitted to him by this individual who claimed that he had actually had been confrontations with the Diro, which was this evil race of kind of like mutants who lived inside the Earth. It was a fascinating series of stories. Whether how much of it was true and all, we could only speculate upon. But even to this very day, people are immensely interested in the Shaver mystery and the Hollow Earth. In fact, our publishing company, Interlight Global Communications, probably has the biggest catalog of books on the subject. Off the top of my head, I couldn't exactly tell you how many books we have out on the Inner Earth and the Shaver mystery, but certainly it must number probably around 25 or so, I would guess, because we have the Hidden World series that Palmer and Shaver were the editors of, as well as many, many different books. But tonight we're going to actually get a first-hand account of civilization beneath Mount Shasta. Now, Mount Shasta, of course, is this very mystical mountain in California where people have all sorts of metaphysical experiences, from UFO sightings to seeing Bigfoot and to meeting the Lemurians. And supposedly Mount Shasta is underneath Mount Shasta is Telos, which is one of the capitals of the inner Earth. And we've published a couple of books on the subject of Mount Shasta, which you can get on Amazon.com. But Tim, why don't you tell the audience tonight who we're going to be talking with on this subject, as well as some other very fascinating topics.
Sure, Tim. Well, I mean, we have Metaphysician Judy Cali. Am I pronouncing that right, Judy?
Yes, you
Cali?
are.
All right. Well, it's a coin toss between Cali or Kaylee. So
it's Cali.
All right. So now, Judy has dedicated her life to spiritual service to mankind, and she says that she was asked by the Lemurian high priest of Telos, Adama, of the inner Earth, to come to Mount Shasta to help form a community called Heart to Heart. She honored the call of the mountain and their Lemurian family and moved there in July of 2009. And Judy has been doing intuitive healing work with the Ascended Masters since she was 3 years old. And I tell you something, Judy, I can't blame you. I mean, if anybody out there has not seen Mount Shasta, you really should. You should take the time and go out there, because there's this a presence about that mountain around it that is just absolutely incredible. And now our other guest is, and I'm so happy that we have Jason with us tonight. We have Jason Offit, and Jason is boy. I mean, you're from Missouri, Jason, and has written some of my most favorite books and columns. Right now, Jason, my favorite one is Across the Corn-Swept Land: An Epic Beer Run Through the Upper Midwest. I love that book, and that one calls to me much like Mount Shasta calls to me as well. And your one of your most recent ones, and this is a parody, isn't it? How to Kill Monsters Using Common Household Items.
Right. That's my the latest one that has come out. Yes, that was an absolutely fun one to research, because really, how many blows from a kitchen chair will a werewolf's cranium take? That's fun research to do.
I know that's questions that I think all of us have asked one time or another in our lives.
And if you haven't, you're food.
There you go. Well, and
for sure.
Jason has also written Haunted Missouri, A Ghostly Guide to the Show Me State's Most Spirited Spots, What Lurks Beyond, The Paranormal in Your Backyard, Darkness Walks the Shadow People Among Us, and that's just a couple of and you've also been working on, you've been writing about each state, am I correct? Is that for Mysterious Universe website?
Right. I've been, I've got a series going on called Exploring American Monsters. And I do a couple a month, and I explore the monsters from each state. I try to avoid the big ones. How many times can I talk about Bigfoot? But certain states have their, particular Bigfoot. Missouri has Momo. Arkansas has the folk monster, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Boggy Creek is my favorite. Right. Boggy Creek, yeah.
That's the one. So, yeah, I do touch on some of the big monsters, but mostly I try and hit the ones nobody's ever heard of.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like Mount Shasta in California, each state seems to have its own unique spot, mystical area, so to speak.
Well, right. I have definitely found that out. Yeah, each state does have one area where weird things tend to happen, and I want to go there.
well, the mystery of Mount Shasta goes back for decades, well over a century. In fact, one of the first accounts I read was about an individual who was crossing on a train, and this would have been maybe 1860 or something like that. And he was looking towards Mount Shasta, and it was surrounded by all these weird manifestations, all these weird UFO type lights. And then, of course, one of the books we published is Mysteries of Mount Shasta and a Dweller on Two Planets. Now, of course, a lot of people go to Mount Shasta for a spiritual experience. And there's an awful lot of channeling that takes place there. And that was one of the first books, I think, in fact, it was the book that got Shirley MacLaine into the whole realm of the paranormal and the metaphysical. Supposedly, she was in a bookstore in France, and the book fell off the shelf into her hands. And let me tell you, A Dweller on Two Planets is a pretty hefty book to fall on anybody. And so we have our own edition of that. We gave Sean Castile the task of taking the manuscript, which has got a little bit of what I would call stilted English in it. It needed a little bit of modernizing. So he spent probably close to 2.5 months, I would say revising, but that's not quite the word that I would use, but he did kind of improve upon the text, and it's a little bit more readable now. But to get back to Judy, our one of our guests here for this evening.
I'm here.
Okay, Judy, I first heard of you through a mutual friend, Diane Robbins. Now,
yes.
Diane Robbins is an author of a book or several books on the inner earth, and she does a bit of channeling herself, and of course she's into the psychic realm. I first met her when she was living, I believe it was in Rochester, New York.
Yes.
And somehow the mountain pulled her, or she, yes. And she ended up going to Mount Shasta. And I guess, does she live in the town over like Weed, or is she still in that area there?
Yes, she lives in Mount Shasta. She moved from Weed into Mount Shasta, and Diane channeled and received a message from the mountain, and she called me, and I channeled for her, and she was deciding, and the message I got was, don't delay. And when she got there, they said to her, you don't need to ever leave the mountain. And so it's a very sacred experience when you feel a call. It's called your clarion call. with Archangel Gabriel, and this was her clarion call. And so I deeply admire and respect Diane Robins' work because all of her books are encoded. She's written 5. She's written Cetaceans, Telos, Hollow Earth, Tree People, and Crystal Kingdom. And all the books are encoded. And what that means is you must come from a pure heart place to set aside your ego and allow the energy to come in and translate it and give it the exact way you're getting it. And so when you read, as an example, Telos, and Adama is the high priest of Telos, you're actually receiving downloads, activations, and initiations through the words energetically as you're reading it. And every time you read it, you are downloaded, activated, and initiated differently in the way that honors you. And it's one of the gifts that I have. I am encoded with my throat through the divinity. And as I speak with people, they are being automatically healed and cleared in the way that honors them. It's not me, it's the divinity that works through you. So I really deeply appreciate the work that Diane does because she addresses all the areas and all the different frequencies. And it's a huge undertaking. And she's such a pure heart. And so her website is www.DianeRoBlikeandBoy, DianeRobins.com. And it's just, I deeply, deeply admire her work. And I'm very dedicated to making sure that people wake up, that are here to wake up, and understand that they're part of this experience in whatever way honors them.
Well, Judy, where are you from originally, and how did the mountain call to you?
Well, first of all, I was born in LA in the Queen of Angels Hospital, and I've been in the city of angels, and I've been working with angels ever since. And I first experienced what you would call the information about inner earth when I read a channeling, and I was asked by a dear friend, I call her my sister of the heart, in Massachusetts when I lived in Massachusetts. And she got a call telepathically from the trees in Mount Shasta, and they asked her to come, that they needed her help, and she listened. And so she came to me and she said, I got this call from the trees in Mount Shasta, and I'm going, and I inside heard, you need to go too. And so I handed her my credit card. I was doing free healing at that time in a church to anybody that walked through the door. And I didn't know anything about how much it would cost. I didn't have the money. I put it on a credit card. And I just said to her, I'm meant to go with you. And she said, okay. And 3 of us went. And we flew into Sacramento. We rented a car into Mount Shasta. And as we were approaching Mount Shasta, she took us in a drive going up the mountain. And the moment we got to the bottom of the mountain where the trees start, I saw us as 3 Lemurian children in little light navy blue kimonos, as children with their little pudgy legs and short, blunt cut black hair. And we were laughing and giggling and running up the mountain. And I told them what I was seeing and what I was feeling. And that night, we all met in a motel room, and one of the ladies had a channeling by Adama, and I had read it on the plane. And I asked her if I could be on a list or whatever for anything more. And at that particular evening, my sister of the heart went up to the trees. She sat very quietly for 30 minutes, and the trees told her that they had had no water in 6 months, that there had been a drought, and they needed rain. And so she came back to the motel room in Mount Shasta. We did a prayer, and it rained the next day. And that night, we connected to Adama. And Adama asked us to do grid work. And that was my first experience with connecting consciously with Adama. And on the plane back, I said to the lady, I would really like to know more about this because I can feel the integrity of his heart. And I didn't hear anything for 3 years, but it was in my prayers. And so I happened to be looking through a Sedona journal, and my guide said, look in the back right corner of the ads. And I never looked at them. And I turned to the back of the book, and there in the right-hand corner of the page was the word Telos, and it was Diane Robbins' advertisement for her book. I literally jumped off the bench. I called her, and keep it short, as I called her, she was pacing and walking, eating cereal in the morning because she was too uncomfortable with burning in her legs. And she had been disabled for a long time and was not okay. She was very, very ill. And my guide said to me, she was your sister in Atlantis. You need to go help her. And you need to stay with her for about 10 days. Now, I lived in Massachusetts at the time. I had a very old car, and she lived in upper state New York. But I listened to my prompting, and so I told her, I said, this is what I'm being told. And she said, she said, tell me a little bit about what you do. And I said, well, one of the gifts I have is I carry a rainbow of all healing colors from both sides of the veil in my heart. The Dolphins showed it to me in the late 1980s from Sedona. And she suddenly got quiet and she said, oh my God, you're the rainbow. And I said, what are you talking about? And this was on a Wednesday morning. And she said, Monday night, I was coming home from the chiropractor. She said, I go 2 or 3 times a day. And she said, I was so exhausted and in so much pain. She said, I pulled over to the side of the road and I said to God, I can't take this anymore. You need to send me some help. And she said, for the first time in 20 years, Judy, I saw the most incredible rainbow over the whole area. And she said, you're the rainbow. And so I did drive to her house. I did spend the 10 days. After about 4 or 5 days, the book publisher sent her Hollow Earth, and she handed it to me. And she said, if you'd like to, you can read this. I said, I would absolutely love to. I spent that evening reading it. And when I saw Mikos's picture and I started reading the words, I burst into tears because I knew this soul very, very much. And so the next morning I told Diane, I know this soul. Every part of me lit up when I started reading about him. And later in that year, Mikos came to me and said, you're one of my many daughters. So then I understood.
Now, are you familiar with the stories revolving around Count Saint Germain, who is said to live inside the mountain?
Well, I work with Saint Germain every day.
Pardon me.
And I work with so many of the ascended masters and all day long. So Saint Germain is one of the more colorful ascended masters I work with. He usually comes on boogie boards, surfboarding, rollerblading. He's just very alive and very funny, and just really is in my heart all the time. So, most of what I feel in my heart is my own connection to them. I don't read a lot. I don't really take in a lot of what other people say. I really believe that each person has to listen to the wisdom of their own heart.
Well, we have a break coming up, and then we will be right back with our guest of the evening.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
That's right, and I want all of our listeners to know that if you have any questions for our guest tonight, for Judy or Jason, then by all means, feel free. Ask. I don't care how you do it. You can call us, mental telepathy, carrier pigeon. We just want to hear your questions. It's just we love to hear from you. So and our guest would love your questions as well. So let's Tim, why don't we go to Jason for a little bit here, and Jason now. Have you been to California and seen Mount Shasta?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
I've got just enough relatives in California that I don't want to go there.
Well, the thing I wanted to ask you is now, I mean, you've traveled all around the United States and overseas into Europe and stuff, but especially here in the United States. I mean, have you run across other places that may have a similar vibe, so to speak, as like Mount Shasta? And I mean, it could be more along the lines of esoterical, or maybe what's the word I'm looking for, typically?
Mystical?
Mystical, but, some of these places also may have a little bit more of a darker vibe as well.
Well, I'm going to say yes and no on that. I'm a journalist by trade. That's what I teach at the university where I work. So I tell stories. I tell people stories, and the people stories I like to tell a lot of times are really spooky. So yeah, I've been to plenty of places, but I'm not really in tune. I mean, I've spent plenty of times in really creepy places that people have said are so haunted that you're gonna experience something, and I never do. That being said, there are spots that do have a vibe. I mean, the area where I live, actually, in Northwest Missouri, the amount of strange happenings that have occurred here over the years are so out of proportion to the population that I think that this is one of those spots that bad things just happen, and it's a shame because it's a beautiful area.
That's interesting, and I tell you something, Jason. I mean, you have been told just some excellent stories that just fascinate me, and this will go a little bit away from the inner Earth story, but Beckley and I both are fascinated by time travel, and you actually talked to somebody at one time that said that he had that experience, didn't you?
Right. Yeah, I have a feeling you're talking about Mike Markham.
That's it. That's the guy.
That's it. Right. I had, of course, I first heard about Mike Markham like most people did on Art Bell's show back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And when I heard that, I was absolutely fascinated. And then years later, I started, I got this job at the university, and I heard a repeat of that show, and I'm like, wait a second, he's from a town that's 27 miles away from where I'm sitting. That's where he did his experiments. So wow. I drove over there. I talked to people. I talked with his arresting officer and a couple of people who worked for the city who went into Markham's house the night that he got arrested. And I got to see the house where the experiments happened. It's pretty. It was pretty cool to experience all that. And then as many people know, Mike Markham was on Art Bell's show a few more times, and then he said that he was going to try his experiment again, and then he just disappeared. He absolutely vanished because of the press that he'd gotten. He was given tons of donations from people because they didn't want him arrested again. They wanted to see him, travel in time. So he got tens of thousands of dollars in donations. He got equipment donations. He was able to rent a warehouse in Kansas City, and then he just disappeared. And I got a hold of him. He's living in Cincinnati. He built a machine, a man-sized machine that he could actually jump through. He tested it by throwing grapefruit and later guinea pigs into, and they would disappear, and he would find them out in the parking lot. One of the things about time travel that a lot of that no author or TV show or movie seems to get is that if somebody travels into the future, that exact spot in space isn't on Earth anymore.
Right.
It's a long way. It's out in the middle of space. Well, what happened was he claims to have. I mean, that's why out in the parking lot. That's where they appeared. But he claims to have jumped into it and appeared 2 years later in a field in outside of Cincinnati, and he had no idea who he was. And he was found and taken to a homeless shelter. And it took him a couple of years to remember who he was and everything that happened. Mm. And I talked to him after that, and he's convinced that he went 2 years in the future.
But he never moved back to his old house. He's staying there in Cincinnati.
No, he stayed in Cincinnati because that's he was from around that area. He had traveled to Stanberry, Missouri. He left electric school to follow a girl, and of course those things never end up well. And it didn't end up well for him.
There was no electricity in the relationship.
I wish I had a rim shot here to play. Yeah.
Hey. Speaking of time travel, I guess I was the main participant behind Al Bielek's going public. Al Bielek, of course, claimed to be the survivor from the Philadelphia experiment. And for better or worse, I met Al back, I think it was on my 40th birthday. Brad and Sherry Steiger were having a little party for me in the backyard of our typesetter, a lady by the name of Hope. She had a nice swimming pool back there, and they lived just outside of Phoenix, and you get some great summer nights there, of course. Pretty hot in the daytime, but some nice summer nights. And there was this fellow with a can of beer and a hot dog over in a lounge chair across from the pool, kind of nodding off. And I said, Brad, who's that over there? There weren't very many people at the outing, And I said, who's that fellow there? And he said, oh, that's Al Bielek, who says that he was, on the Eldridge, the ship where, of course, it was teleported supposedly from the dockyard in Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. So we had a nice little conversation, and I was putting together a conference there in Phoenix. And I said, Al, why don't you come onto the program and tell, the public your story? So he did for the first time, and he became a regular fixture on a lot of the late night talk shows, and we published a couple of books about his life. He's since passed on from this time zone, perhaps to the next one, but we're very familiar with time travels. They come and go pretty much on a daily basis here, I would say. But you know what I want to ask you about? Are you familiar with the phenomena at Marley Woods?
Only cursory. Yeah, I know about it, and I've actually spoken at a couple of conferences where
Ted Phillips.
Ted Phillips has spoken,
yes.
Our schedules have been to where I couldn't actually sit down and talk with him. So,
Ted is an old friend of the show, and we've had many a conversation about Marley Woods. And of course, I've seen some of the video footage. Some of it is impressive, and some of it is not quite as impressive as some of the other footage might be. But he was on the show. I think Tim was within the last 7 or 8 months, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. We've had him on a couple of times. And apparently the objects are growing in size. Some of them are the size of, like softballs or basketballs. But now they've seen some, and you talk about the inner Earth, coming up out of the ground that are 30 feet in diameter. And some people, I think, have even had these globes appear in their homes. So there is something weird going on. Now, Judy, you spent time on Mount Shasta?
Yes, I originally was asked by Adama to go there, and as you said, form a community called Heart to Heart. And I did go to Mount Shasta, and I was told originally I would probably be there for 3 years. I ended up being there only 6 months. I completed what I was asked to do in 6 months. And the mountain is in my heart. It calls you. You feel it. It's I'm feeling it now. It's just a part of me. It's a very sacred feeling. Very sacred.
Now, have you actually been inside the mountain? Have you been to Telos?
I have in my sleep state. I have not consciously.
Mm-hmm.
I am very aware, because I've done several experiences. Like right now, they're all standing here. Quite a group is here, and
well, that'll increase that'll increase our audience.
it's there's Adama standing right in front of me. There's Miko standing to my right. There's Maitreya standing to my left. There's Jesus standing in my left corner. There's Mary Magdalene standing in my right corner. There's Buddha off to my far right. There's a leprechaun about 2 feet in front of me. This is my life. I deal with this every day. So for me, being in Mount Shasta was a very sacred experience because the energy is so powerful there of the mountain that it expands wherever you're at. So anything positive in your life expands, and anything unloving in your life expands. So you come to more of a place of balance after you've been there a while, because it really does bring forth whatever your energy field is. It's very, very strong.
Well, now you obviously didn't just hop into Mount Shasta. You've had experiences starting back when you were a child. Were these some near-death experiences or out of body?
I've had 4 near-death experiences. My first was when I was 3 years old. I was one of the first children they did open heart surgery on in 1949. And I still remember my near-death experience. And I literally was standing in the tunnel, and I was not raised religious, but I knew instantly who Jesus was. And I still see myself. I was standing there. He was holding my right hand with his left hand. He showed me a scanning machine. And a scanning machine is like a 3-dimensional hologram machine that before you're born and during near-death experiences, you see every choice you would make and where it would take you. And when people say I saw my whole life flash before me, they're seeing a scanning machine. And so I remember him holding me in his arms, and he showed me the scanning machine, and it showed me everything that I wanted to experience in this lifetime. And I got very quiet with big tears in my eyes because I didn't want to be here. It was too painful. I came into the womb and it felt like I hit a brick wall. It was so painful. And so I decided to leave at 3 years old. And Jesus said to me, I want to show you that you're going to have a baby brother born in 6 months with club feet. And he showed me my baby brother, and he said, do you want to stay or do you want to go? And I remember looking at my baby brother in the machine, and I remember looking at Jesus with tears in my eyes, and I said, I don't want my brother to be alone. And the next thing I knew, I was back in my body being operated on, and the surgeon looked at me, because in 1949, a lot of the times when they did surgery, they used very little anesthesia because they were afraid it would kill you. So I felt what I was going through. And when I woke from coming from the tunnel back onto the surgeon's table, I looked in the surgeon's eyes, and he had the most gentle, compassionate look, because he knew I could feel him cutting into my chest. And at that moment, my sacred heart opened. And that was the whole reason I had allowed it on a soul level. And from that moment forward, I started working with the ascended masters and angels. And I did it for 40 years, and I didn't tell anybody. It was a private experience between me and the divinity. And then about 15 years ago, Ascended Master Hilarion, the Master of Healing, asked me to go public, and I said I would. So, yes, my experience with Mount Shasta was absolutely sacred from the moment that I arrived. I thought I was there to look for a place to live, and Adama contacted me through Diane. Diane called me and said, Adama wants you to be on television tomorrow. And I said, okay. And she said, they're filming it on the mountain. I said, okay. And she said, would you channel? I said, absolutely. And I did it 3 times, plus their local television show, 3 times in just 1 week that I was up there to find a place to live. Then I came back to Palm Desert and then went back there and lived there for 6 months.
And you're in Palm Desert now, or Palm Springs?
Yes, I am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
beautiful area. Wish I could afford to live there.
Judy, for those in our audience who may not be sure of this term, just exactly who or what is an ascended master?
Ascended masters are beings who have lived on planet Earth in 3rd dimension And in third dimension is the largest dimension of contrast. It's the only dimension where you have Hitler and Mother Teresa in one lifetime. You can have every kind of experience you choose here because it's polarities, it's duality in third dimension. So for me personally, Ascended Master is a being who has lived a lot of life experience and has made the decision to be in their sacred heart, coming from a love-based way of living, heart to heart, more than 51% of the time. Not 100%, 51%. And by the way, that's what you have to be in Telos. You have to be in your sacred heart, living sacred heart to sacred heart more than 51% of the time.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was wondering, you said that you have been in Mount Shasta in, like a spiritual form, but is it possible for somebody to physically go there? I mean, I know I've heard the stories that there are, openings in the mountains that if people know where to look, that they can physically gain access, to the interior and to Telos. I mean, have you heard of that happening?
Well, I will tell you, to answer your question, two things. First of all, I was asked in 2007 to do a conference call with several people around the world who wanted to know exactly what you're asking. And my initial response was, I'm hearing you enter through the heart. And they said, no, we want to know where on the mountain we can open the doors and find the caves and go in. And I said, I will agree to do this call on one condition. And they looked at me, and the two men who approached me, and I said, I will only tell the truth. I will not tell you what you want to hear. I will only tell you what I'm honestly getting. I don't know what that is, but I'm telling you, I'm going to only tell you whatever honestly comes through me. I'm not attached to the information at all. And so when I did the call, it turned out I channeled Mikos for an hour and a half. And one of the first things Mikos said, and Mikos is the head librarian in Hollow Earth, in the Library of Pathologos. And Library of Pathologos used to be the Library of Alexandria. And so Mikos is the author, actually the being who Diane channels in her third book called Hollow Earth. And so that was one of the questions. And Mikos said, you can only enter Telos sacred heart to sacred heart. Now let me tell you why that is. There's a woman named Sharula Dux that is the daughter.
I was just going to mention her because she used to come to our conferences and talk.
Okay. Yeah. And Sharula Dux was the daughter of Ra and Ranamu, who are the top beings, if that's what you want to call them, in Telos. And she is over 300 years old. She came on the top of the planet, and she married a man named Shields. And she was asked if Shields had ever been in Hollow Earth in Telos, and she said, no, he's not pure enough. And they said, well, what do you mean? And she said, our children do not understand unloving energy. They're not exposed to it. They're not exposed to aging. They're not exposed to illness. They're not exposed to disease, and they're not exposed to hatred. And so she said, for our children, if you came in and you had a judgmental thought, she said, because our beings can be anywhere from 7 to 8 feet tall. Some of them can be 12 and 15 and 16 and 20 feet tall. She said, so you would make what you think is an innocent statement, and you would see one of them and you'd say, oh my God, look how tall she is. And she said, that's a very judgmental statement, even though you don't think it is. And she said, it would be like taking your foot and kicking it in the gut as hard as you could to one of our children. And so she said, we cannot allow that consciousness to be in Telos. She said, you must come from a pure heart. And so she said, my husband's not there yet. And it gave me a very clear awareness, because I'm very aware, even from the time I was a teenager, that when people say 4-letter words, when people say unkind things to other people, I feel it like pins going into my heart energetically. It's that harsh. I feel it. And so I understood what she was saying. when you're coming from a loving place of non-judgmental and not criticism, it would be like taking an infant. That's how pure they are. When you come from divinity and you come through the womb and the veil of forgetting and you're an infant, you're pure and you are truly authentic. You laugh, you cry, and you coo and everything honestly within 2 seconds of each other. If you've ever been around an infant, they don't care. They cry when they feel sad, they laugh when they feel delighted, and when they're absolutely enchanted, they just sit and stare. And then we got talked out of it, and we became what John Bradshaw calls the adapted self. And now we're having the opportunity to go back into being authentic because we're shifting from third to fifth dimension. So to answer your question, it really is important that we live through our heart. And that's how you enter Telos. You must come from a loving heart.
All right. Well,
now are there people living there from the surface?
Nikola Tesla lives there.
Really?
Yep, Nikola Tesla lives there, and so do the animals that have been extinct on the top of the planet, except for the dinosaurs. It took hundreds of years for them to feed them a vegetarian diet until all of the anger and aggression that they had been exposed to on the top of the planet left their bodies. And now all the animals in Telos are all vegetarians. And they are just, it's just an amazing thing. There's no aggression in them at all.
Hey, Tim, I just want to break in here real quick. We're going to have to be going to a break in just a couple of minutes, but I want to encourage our listeners once again to, if you have any questions for our guest, Judy or Jason, feel free to call us, text us, however you want to. We love to hear from you, and so just do so. I mean, we got a break coming up at the top of the hour. And that's a perfect time for you to send your questions in to us.
Well, I think we have a whole new energy into the show this evening. We really haven't done, I guess we might say we're a little bit more on the nuts and bolts side of the spectrum here. We haven't done all that many, I guess, metaphysical type. Well, we've done a few, I mean, I would guess. But I think this is a lot of important information, and hopefully our listeners are getting a great deal of enlightenment out of this. And, I think...
Well, if anything, they'll want to go and visit the mountain now.
Hopefully they'll pay more attention to listening to their heart.
That's right. Well, all right. So stay tuned. We will be right back with more Exploring the Bizarre.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Indeed. We are back, and we have some very fascinating guests with us tonight. We've got Judy Cali,
Hi.
who is telling us all about Mount Shasta and the Ascended Masters. And I understand that in a little while, after the next break, we're going to have a special exclusive channeling from one of the Ascended Masters, who has a message, direct message, exclusively for us. And so we're very, very excited about that. It's not too often that we get a message from Telos inside the inner earth. And we also have with us Jason Offutt. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes,
Jason?
Offutt.
Offutt, yes. And, Jason, I do want to get a little bit about your... I know you've been into all this, the unknown, the supernatural. I don't know how the paranormal since you were rather young. Now I know it says in your bio that you saw Bigfoot imprints growing up.
Well, no, I looked for Bigfoot imprints growing up. When I was a kid, is when there was the big Momo scare in Missouri, which was over on the eastern part of the state. So I followed
the one
that
with the three toes, right?
Well, that was down. That was down in Louisiana with the three toes. Momo was just a typical traditional Bigfoot, but this was the very early '70s, and that sort of thing really wasn't talked about that much. I mean, the Patty sighting was was only a few years old at that point. But it was big news in the newspaper, and being a newspaper geek, even when I was a kid, I read about those, and I went traipsing all over the place trying to find Bigfoot prints. No, my what got me interested in the paranormal was I lived in a 120-year-old what used to be a 2-room schoolhouse, and of course now it's probably 400-year-old house. I'm not quite that old, but I walked out of my bedroom one afternoon and walked into the hallway to get a book, and there was a little boy standing there about 6 years old. He had dark hair, a blue flannel shirt, and blue jeans, and he was staring at me, and I could see the bookshelf through him. Huh. And I don't know how long we stared at each other, but he finally blinked, and that broke my shock, and I turned around, walked into my room and shut the door and didn't talk to anybody about it for 30 years. But that's what got me interested was seeing a full-bodied apparition in my house.
That would do it.
The boy's name is Nathan, by the way.
Okay, I'm almost going to say thank you. I had someone try and tell me this before, and I didn't want to know anything about the little boy.
Oh, I don't want to share anything. I just wanted the little boy saying, by the way, his name is Nathan.
Okay.
So I'm just telling you what his name is.
Thank you. I didn't want it to be any more personal than it already was.
No, I wouldn't. But that's what he wanted you to know.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I understand also too that your family had a UFO sighting together.
Right, and yes, I grew up on a farm. And the closest house was a little over a half mile away. And there was fields between us. And one night, my dad, in the spring, when farmers are planting, they will plant literally from before dawn till well into the evening. So it was dark. It was probably about 10 o'clock when Dad finally got home, and he didn't come in the house. And I went outside to see what was going on, and he was standing by his pickup looking up into the sky, and in the field, above the field, was just, it was a clear night. There was living out in the country, stars go everywhere. And there was just a black spot in the sky. And he said, just shh, listen to this. And we listened, and there was a hum. And there was nowhere else that could have been coming from other than the black spot in the sky. And I went in and got Mom, and we all saw this thing that was blotting out the stars, and we heard it, and the phone rang. And I ran inside to get it, and it was our neighbor from the farmhouse across the fields, asking if we saw the same thing that he was seeing. Huh. And he saw the black spot and heard the hum, and we stayed out there, and eventually it just rose up into the air and it disappeared. The hum went along with it. Cannot explain that.
Yeah, so see, I mean, you've had your own personal experiences. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but not when I try to. That's when I tell people who are like, how can I see a ghost? I'm like, you can't.
Yeah. The harder you try, the more evasive it is.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, Jason, Earlier in the program, Judy was talking about the ascended masters that were there in the room with her, and one of them she said was a leprechaun, and that just reminded me of your story of Gary Donaldson and the Fey Girl. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that one?
Oh my gosh, yes. And this was actually, a few years ago that I wrote this, but this was in southeastern Missouri, if I remember correctly. Yes, this guy named Gary Donaldson had met a girl and had just immediately fallen head over heels in love with her. And they immediately started fooling around, and it was the best physical experience that he could possibly ever imagine. And she eventually confessed to him that she was Fae. She was not 100% Fae, but she was part Fae, and that he started noticing strange things about her that were not quite human, mostly in her lack of emotions or misunderstanding emotions and abilities that she had. She worked evenings all through the night because she told him that's where when Fae usually worked, and usually were out, so they didn't draw a lot of attention to themselves. But she was delivering newspapers, and they were driving, and the car ran out of gas, and he was like, "Oh, okay, I'll get the gas can and I'll walk." And she's like, "No need." And she drove until they got to a gas station, even though the car had no gas. Eventually, she got tired of him and broke off the relationship, which was emotionally destructive to him. And on his way home, he apparently something caught his attention. Something dark caught this man's attention and followed him home, and a lot of strange things started happening to him and his daughter. And he called and pleaded for this Fae girl to help him get rid of the darkness, and she did. But it was a really, really bizarre story, and he was serious. I've got a pretty good BS detector, and he was at least serious about what he was saying about meeting someone and having a relationship with someone who was part fairy.
And that's what I was going to ask next. Is what's the definition of a Fae girl? I mean, so traditionally it would be like what we would think of as fairies, or the
fairy, elf, whatever you want to call them. Your other guest mentioned leprechaun. I interviewed a Jewish exorcist from Kansas City who he had talked to me in depth about a conversation that he had with a leprechaun, and that floored me because I'd never heard of anyone talking to one before. But apparently that happens.
Really? And did he tell you what the conversation was about?
Well, it was mainly about an elemental that this man was trying to banish from a house. That was causing all sorts of problems with the homeowners, and the leprechaun was trying to tell him that you can't do anything. Just tell the homeowners to move. The elemental was there first.
Oh, yeah, and the elemental will leave when it wants to leave.
Right.
Well, okay. We have a question now from Troy from California, and Judy, you can answer this. Jason, if you have any comments, feel free to chime in. But Troy wants to know, if everyone knows about Mount Shasta, how come our government hasn't gone in and took control of it in the land grab?
They actually have tried to go in through the North Pole on several occasions, and that's when everything was closed off because of that. So they have tried.
So what? There's actually then a tunnel system that goes from the North Pole?
There's a tunnel system inside all of the Earth that is there. They go through tubes. They ride air frequency ships that go all inside the Earth, and there's tunnels all through inner Earth. And, there's openings all over the Earth. There's one in Tibet. There's one in the Himalayas. and it's all over the earth. And they used to be open, but they closed them all because of people trying to come in.
Yeah, you know that here in southern Indiana, there has been, a story that has circulated for years and years that there's an extensive tunnel system that we have a limestone bedrock, and there's a lot of caves around here, but that a lot of these caves somewhere in the far past had been what's the word I'm trying to think of? Modified, by I guess the people who lived here before the Great Flood. I know that Judy. I mean,
Atlantis.
They've told you Atlantis and Lemurians.
Yes. Plus all planets are hollow to begin with, and most civilizations live inside the planets. They don't live on the top of the planets like we do.
Mm-hmm. Now, Brian from Vegas has asked, do these tunnels connect at all with the underground tunnels the government has? And I know that we've talked about this with Tina before, that, like out in Nevada, there supposedly is an extensive tunneling system that the military has put up over the years. Are you familiar, Judy? I mean,
first of all, they're very aware, the beings inside inner Earth. They're very, very aware of everything that's going on the top of the planet. They're very aware of what's going on a moment by moment basis. Mm-hmm. And so they protect inner Earth. And the reason is we're going through a shift that we have never gone through before. It's never happened on the planet before. The last time they tried was 12,500 years ago, which was when Atlantis and Lemuria tried. And their civilizations created self-destruction because they misused crystalline energy. So this is the first time in 12,500 years that we've tried to shift from third to fifth dimension, and we're actually doing it. It's never happened before. So part of the issue is they've maintained fifth dimension all this time, and fifth dimension is a dimension where there's no disease, there's no aging, and there's no illness, because it's love-based, and what causes aging, illness, and disease is fear. And fear toxics the body. And so the Lemurians live by what brings them joy in their heart, and that's how they've lived for more than 12,500 years. And they've maintained that frequency on the planet so that when we chose to go through ascension, we didn't have to recreate the fifth dimension. They've been maintaining it for us.
Now, do they ever appear do they take on physical form and appear from time to time on the surface? Because I do know that several people on Mount Shasta, while walking up the trails there, claim to have actually had conversations with either Saint Germain or other entities.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Well, and there's also the stories about them coming into towns and trading with, gold and jewels and stuff like that for supplies.
Well, you have to remember that they are in fifth dimension, and what that means is they're androgynous, and they're in their light bodies most of the time. It's only in third dimension that you're in human bodies as male and females. We're shifting out of that, and we're becoming androgynous, and we're becoming into our light bodies, which are crystalline based instead of carbon based. That's part of the shift we're making.
Now we have a question from Kathy from Texas, and she wants to know, there have been many contactees who talk about the reptilians having an underground tunnel system and being on the planet long before humans. And so she wants to know, do these beings have a connection to the inner Earth as well?
No. There were many different civilizations living inside the Earth when third dimension was very strong. But we are now in fourth going into fifth. We shift December 21st, 2012. And when December 21st, 2012 happened, every soul's higher self on the planet, it's called your I Am Presence, every soul agreed to ascension, regardless of what their human choices are making and what their human behavior is. So we are shifting into fourth dimension, and now we're shifting into fifth. And it's an individual experience. Every soul has to make their own ascension. It's not something anybody can do for anybody else.
All right. Well, we've got a question from Craig from California, and this is for Jason. Craig wants to know, Jason, that you had mentioned Bigfoot earlier in the program, and Craig wants to know, why don't you think that that anyone has caught a Bigfoot or will catch a Bigfoot? And he wants to know, do you think that they could be interdimensional beings, or maybe something not quite physical?
Well, there have been, lots of reports of Bigfoot disappearing. So, I mean, that's where the interdimensional being, the theory comes up, is that they were there 1 minute and they were gone the next. So, I mean, who knows on that? I mean, I'm not going to speculate on that. I'm one of those people who thinks, if there is a cryptozoological creature out there, it is going to get caught. It's probably going to be Bigfoot or the Tasmanian tiger. That's probably going to be the first one. But why haven't one been caught? There have been lots of reports of Bigfoot and Bigfoot type creatures across the planet being captured at some point. There was an Alma in Russia that was not only captured, the townspeople
lived in the town. Yeah. In fact, I wrote that up for Fate magazine probably 30 years ago or something like that.
Right.
Well, there was a case I remember. I did an article, I think back around 1975 for Saga magazine. It was on the skunk ape of the Everglades, long before anybody was writing about the skunk ape. And there was an incident that was related to me about a security guard who had cornered some smelly, hairy beast. I believe that some of the early cases there were of albino type creatures. Anyway, he had cornered this rather tall, smelly beast. I think it was about 7 feet tall, and it had gotten into the back of a van or a truck of some kind, like a fairly large 18-wheeler, because they could hear it rummaging around in there and banging on the side of the walls. They locked the door. They called the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department showed up with a couple of squad cars. But when they opened the back door to the truck, our friend was gone. Although I understand that the back of the vehicle did still have a terrible smell to it. So there does seem that some of these cryptoids, as we've come to call them, and last week we had on Butch, who from Pennsylvania, and Rick Hilberg from Ohio, who told us all about not only these Bigfoot creatures, but apparently there have been a rash of sightings of wolfmen. Tim, is that how you would describe them?
Dogmen.
Dogmen. Yeah. Okay. Phantom hounds, these were more than phantom hounds, because when they stood up on their hind legs, weren't they something like 7.5 or 8 feet tall?
Yes. Well,
they
had a humanoid appearance except for their head.
They kind of look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They kind of look like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Can I share something real quickly?
Well, by all means.
I've communicated with Sasquatch many times, and they were one of the reasons Atlantis sank. We were creating half animals and half humans. That's where they come from, and that's where they were experimented on, and that's where they were created. To answer your question.
That's something that J.C. Johnson, who is a researcher out in the Four Corners area, feels, that a lot of the hairy ones and some of the other more unusual creatures that have been seen around that area. I mean, there have been people who have seen like centaurs and things like that out there, and it's in his opinion that that there was an antediluvian civilization that actually, like you said, Judy, I mean, they actually did genetic manipulation and created these things.
Yes, I didn't want to take away from Jason. I just wanted to interject.
Well, no, by all means, that's That's what we do here. But that reminds me of a tale. I was on the Travel Channel recently, and we did a segment on Joshua Tree in California. Of course, the Mojave Desert, where
Yeah.
there's been all sorts of very strange and peculiar activity, mainly UFO sightings and landings and abductions. And of course, it's the home of George Van Tassel, the late George Van Tassel's Integratron.
I've been there.
Sort of time machine. Yeah, it's very wonderful building. I have to. Very, very, very peculiar. What was made without any sort of metal whatsoever, no nails, no screws or anything like that. And is very acoustically sound, I understand.
Yeah.
But now there are a couple of cases that have been reported to me near, I guess, Edwards Air Force Base, where the sentries, the MPs, I guess, that have been on guard there, have watched through their binoculars albino-type Bigfoot creatures seen wandering around the desert. And I think one of the MPs was even attacked by one of these creatures, and its a rifle or weapon was taken away or bent or something to that degree. So there are a lot of strange things that are happening out in California. I would say it's probably the one of the leading paranormal states as far as weird and bizarre incidents go.
I've worked with the Venusians and the Pleiadians personally, so I've had different experiences, but I think each person has to listen to their own heart as to what's truth for them.
Well, we're coming up on a break, and then Judy, when we come back, you're going to channel some of at least one of the beings from the inner earth, and we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say. Indeed, and you'll have to describe what you're doing in just a little bit more detail, and we should be back in a few minutes with our guest tonight, and we're talking about Mount Shasta and other strange and weird places that actually one can visit and perhaps have a paranormal experience of their own. And we'll be right back, and this is Tim and Tim. I'm going down in the elevator to the inner earth right now. One of the stories that the grand storyteller of all time, Long John Neville, used to tell, he said that there was an entrance to the inner earth somewhere here in Manhattan. He would never exactly disclose where it was, but supposedly you would get into an elevator, you would push the basement button, and then when you got down to the basement, you would push the, floor 2 and 3 is a code, and the elevator car would slide sideways and then go down to a deeper level where you would meet all sorts of beings, creatures. I don't know how whether they were the good guys or the bad guys necessarily. According to Shaver, he had 2 groups. One were the Dero, which were kind of like the mutant robots, and then there were the good guys, the Tero, that kind of protected the surface dwellers from the shenanigans and the evil deeds of the Dero. But Judy, tell us a little bit about what you're going to do now. I understand that we're actually going to participate.
Tim, wait a minute here. We have a question from Beth from Utah.
Okay,
yeah, let's go ahead and get this since Beth actually took the trouble to write into us. Absolutely. And Beth wants to know that there are people who say that they channel ascended masters, like you, Judy. And how can you tell the difference between those that are telling the truth and those, I suppose, who are, just spinning a tall tale maybe to make some money?
Beth, that's an excellent question. I've been channeling and doing healing work for 66 years. And in 66 years, I've never received a negative, unloving message. And the reason is I work through the I am presence. And when you work through the I am presence and you're aligned to the highest integrity and light of your soul and the highest wisdom of your soul, your ego's not involved at all. You're connected to your higher self. That's how you know. How you know whether or not the message is truthful for you is your heart. Once you learn to listen to your heart will tell you. Your heart is 5,000 times more powerful than your head. And your heart never lies to you. Your head lies to you all day long. Your head tells you What about this? What about that? I don't know. Could be. Your heart, you're driving and you sense, you come to a T in the road, and your intuition tells you, I need to turn left. And then you turn right and you get lost, but you knew you needed to turn left. Everybody has that psychic gift. Everybody does. It's
Bless you,
one of
Lord.
4 that everybody has. So as you learn to listen to the wisdom of your own heart and you honor it, then you're given more, because the connection gets stronger and stronger. And that's how you know. When something comes out that's unloving, that's judgmental, that's critical, that's not coming from the Ascended Masters. That's coming from their ego through their own fear.
All right. Now I think we should have a little bit of silence here. Is there anything that the listeners could do to increase the vibrations? Should
No,
we?
just be open, because I don't know what they're going to say, and I'm not attached to whatever they're going to say.
Yes.
I'm just, Adama's been standing here front and center, and came in earlier today, and I can see Mikos and I can see Maitreya, but they're not coming front. Who's coming right front is Adama, so he's who I'm going to connect to.
All right. Well,
All
you take over and continue with this.
Good evening. It is with great pleasure that I connect with you in this venue, which is a remarkable way to connect to people that I personally may not have connected to before. The energy frequency of who I am is connecting to you, and you are feeling it in every fiber of your being. Whether you choose to feel comfortable with it or whether you choose not to feel comfortable with it, I'm here. And so I am presenting to you that for those of you that feel an inner prompting and an inner calling and an inner understanding within your own heart that says, yes, I really would choose to honor the part of me that knows about this, I extend my hand to you, and I will come to you at 2 o'clock in the morning, between 2 and 3, and I will extend my hand to you, and you may take it, and I will take you where you need to go. And in that time, you will have an opportunity to see a part of your own heart that you are not even aware of. And in that frequency, all is known and all is love. This was important for me to share this evening, and I do not have any interest in taking up excessive amounts of your time. I merely wanted to give you an opportunity to say to those that are open and are choosing to be a part of what their heart is guiding them to, I am extending the invitation. I want you to know that all the listeners that are listening have been coming into inner earth in their dream state for many, 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 many years. They just may not consciously remember it, but I know each of you personally. And so as I approach you, you will feel the light in your heart, and you will feel the song in your body of the vibrations that are being emitted, and you will know within your own being. And so I am extending this invitation to touch my hand with your hand, and I will take you into the realms of your own heart and help you go home and understand what going home is. And then I will bring you back. I am Adama. I am considered the High Priest of Telos, and it is my deep pleasure to have an opportunity to share with you at this time.
All right. Well, thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Adama. So now, Judy, what do you feel when you go into this state and channel these messages?
Each being has what's called a heart song. And your heart song is the vibration of self-love that you carry in your heart. It's how you're known on the other side. It's how your relatives know you, because there's a certain song that your heart sings. And there's a tribe in Africa who, when a child is born, the medicine person of that village is given the heart song of the child. And the whole village sings it while the child is being born. And when the child misbehaves, the whole child is surrounded by the whole village, and they sing the child's heart song to help the child remember who they are. So that's what Adama is talking about, which is beautiful. He doesn't often talk about it in that way, so I was quite surprised. But what he's talking about is the heart song. And the heart song is the vibration of your own self-love. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I actually feel the energy, frequency, or imprint of each being. And it's an individual expression, but it's also a part of you. It's a part of me. There's a part of me that's Jesus. There's a part of me that's Buddha. There's a part of you that's Jesus. There's a part of you that's Buddha, because we're all and everything on the more expanded frequencies. So what I'm actually connecting to is the part of me that's part of them. That's really what I'm connecting to. And it's a very different energy. I can feel the difference in Kuan Yin. I can feel the difference in Gandhi. I can feel the difference in Krishna. I can feel the difference in Ernest Holmes. Earlier tonight, George Washington came in, and he has a connection with Jason. And so it was very interesting because they each have a different frequency, and I can feel it. And all I do is I allow, I stay out of it, and I allow, and then they come through. And it's a very beautiful gift. I feel deeply grateful that I've had an opportunity to experience these various beings.
Okay, well, Judy, can you tell us how George Washington then has a connection with Jason?
I was going to ask that question.
I didn't want to say anything without Jason's permission. But George Washington and you were very good friends. You had a life at that particular time, and you and George Washington were very good friends. And so there's a frequency that you carry that is very connected with him. And if you've ever had an interest, if you have found that history is important to you, or the Constitution and all of that and all those kind of things, that's your pull, because you are living a life, and we're living all our lives now. There's no past and there's no future. We actually haven't created tomorrow yet. It's like a radio dial, which I find interesting since we're doing a radio show. It's like a radio dial. You know, you can dial 94.7, you can dial 106.5, but there's hundreds of radio stations that are alive and ready for you, depending on what you're focused in. You're living all your lives now. And we're now expanding into more of who we are and becoming multidimensional. And we're starting to tap into other life experience of who we are. And we're living lives as everything. We're not just humans. We're living lives as mountains and seas and animals and plants. We're every form of life. There is no such thing as a hierarchy. We are each a piece of the puzzle of life, and each piece matters. We're each a weave of the weave of life, and no one string is more important than the other. Actually, animals have a higher consciousness than we do, because they know how to unconditionally love. So I communicate with plants and animals and crystals and trees, and it's all I'm speaking to is the true divine energy that we're all made out of, that everything is made out of. That's actually what you're talking to, that's living a life as a tree, or living a life as a planet, or living a life as a star system, or living a life as an animal.
All right. Well, we have a question here from Lori from Sparks, Nevada. And this is for you, Jason. Lori wants to know, you talked earlier about your UFO experience with you and your family. And she says there are some who say that if you have seen a UFO, you've been on it. So her question to you, Jason, is have you ever done a hypnotic regression to see if your experience, if there's more information hidden away somewhere, I guess, in the vast darkness of your subconscious?
I guess the question that I would have to counter that question is, why would I want to know? I haven't. I did, for a story I was writing, I did interview a lady at a convention once, and she just, right off the top, I didn't bring up any sort of UFO encounter with her. She just told me that I'd been abducted and started telling me all this information, and I asked her to please stop because I didn't really want to know. So yeah, that's the only experience that I ever had, and it was just me along with my family and the neighbor witnessing something. So no, I haven't really done anything at all to try and go any deeper. I have gone underneath hypnosis before, hypnotic regression. I was doing a story on past life regression and, wanted to write, from a first person account, and found some, really fascinating, emotionally tear jerking things out about, myself, I should say. I don't know if it's about a past life or just what my head was coming up with, but I have done, some hypnotic regression before, and it was pretty interesting.
Well, can you share a little bit of that with us? I mean, if it's if you don't want to, I mean that's
no,
right.
I could. That was really vague. So yeah, sure. Why not? Why I don't want to leave you hanging. First, I didn't think I could be put under hypnosis, and of course, I was absolutely wrong. I went under hypnosis, and I saw somebody who I knew was myself. Was a peasant, was a pig farmer, and somewhere in Europe. And thinking about it afterwards, I'm like, yeah. Usually people who have past life regression, they say they were Napoleon or King Tut or somebody like that. No, I was just a peasant raising pigs. And I fell in love with this young girl at a fair, and we eventually got married, and she died in childbirth, and I lived alone and drank myself to death. Yeah. And I woke up from my hypnotic trance with tears. My face was just wet with tears. My shirt was, the collar was wet because I'd been crying so hard. And yeah, that was my past life regression. Hey, this life has been looking up.
Yeah, I'd say so compared to that. Jason, I wanted to ask you about your recent series of articles about different beasties in every state. Now, the states that you have covered so far, which one of these, and you give us a couple examples, which one of these have fascinated you the most? Which ones have really stood out as being like, wow, that one's just crazy?
Crazy. I think, and I'm trying to,
put you in the spot here. Yeah.
Put me on the spot. I'm thinking it's Nevada, actually.
Really?
A story about people hiking and going up on the top of a butte. I'm using the right term, right? Butte. What's the flat top mountains?
I think you're correct. I think that's Butte.
Yeah, Butte. And they saw something. They thought it was a cloud, but they, looking at it, it wasn't a cloud. It came down, and it was kind of a sort of translucent type, gelatinous type figure that had been floating in the air that came down on top of this butte, and it was injured. It looked injured. It appeared injured to them, and it had been floating and came down. And when they started to approach it, a much larger one came down and touched it and took it up into the air with it. And I mean, that's just kind of bizarre to begin with. But a story I wrote, I used to write for 4 years, I wrote a newspaper column on the paranormal called From the Shadows, and all my archives on From the Shadows are at my website, jasonoffit.com. But the thing that struck me was that there was this very similar story of a similar entity from California. A guy had been fishing, doing some night fishing, and he was in his garage, had the door open, lights on, and was cleaning fish, and saw something outside and went to investigate, and he described this exact entity that these other people had described in Nevada. So I mean, just the connection was, it wasn't there. I mean, these people couldn't have communicated, and they came upon the same type of entity, a couple states away, or not a couple states. They're connected, but anyway, I just thought that was pretty fascinating and absolutely bizarre.
Well, that sounds a lot like Trevor Constable's Critters. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he, in the 1960s, he would take, I can't, sort of maybe like ultraviolet film, and would just randomly take pictures of the sky. And he was producing some absolutely incredible photographs that seemed to show amoeba type of things floating around. And I mean, not just like small thing, but big, about the size of what you were describing there. So it's very reminiscent of that.
Right. So yeah. So I mean, just for me having two cases like that, I'm like, okay, that sounds more like it could be real. And now you came up with something else that helps try to solidify that. Cool.
Well, now, what about in your in your home state of Missouri? What kind of fascinating creatures do you have there?
Well, creatures, I'm really fascinated by the two things about the paranormal that really fascinate me are time travel and cryptozoology.
Right.
And I've interviewed a couple of different people. You've mentioned this entity this evening, as a matter of fact, Dogman.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed a couple of people who have seen a Dogman. The most convincing one was a guy who I interviewed a couple of times, and he's a very serious young man. He and a friend of his were investigating a cemetery, and they weren't coming up with anything, so they decided to go home. And it was 10, 11 o'clock at night, and the cemetery was off the highway on a gravel road. You had to go down a hill and up a hill to the cemetery. So they were leaving. They went down the hill, and their headlights at the bottom of the hill struck a really large dog eating something in the middle of the dirt road, some roadkill, and it didn't move. They were about 10 feet from it. The guy I talked to, I talked to both guys in the truck, and they both said that they could smell wet dog out. They had their windows down, and the driver beeped the horn a couple of times. The dog turned its head toward them, stood up on its hind legs, turned its head towards the woods, and walked out into the woods.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, Judy, Jason, unfortunately, we are getting close to the end of our program here, so I want to give you an opportunity, both of you, to let our listeners know where they can find out more about you. Jason, why don't you start here? Give us your website, any new books, things like that.
Okay, yeah. My website is Jason Offutt, JASONOFFUTT, JasonOffutt.com. I've got most stuff that I've written. I've got humor columns. I've got paranormal columns. I've got quite a few columns on a trip I took to England. And I've got all my books. I've got links to all my books on Amazon. I've written paranormal books, humor books, humorous travel log that Tim mentioned earlier in the show, Across a Corn-Swept Land, and a novel, a funeral story, which is my mother-in-law said was naughty, but I've got a book coming out. Actually, it's not a book. A book is coming out with two novellas. One of them is mine. The novella is called Matriarchal Nazi Cannibals. And it's being released on March 18th. So if you go to my website around March 18th, you will have all sorts of information on how to get your hands on it.
All right. And Judy, where can we find more about you online?
I have a website. It's JudyCali.com, Judy Cali. And also remember DianeRobbins.com and her 5 books. So it's been my pleasure to be here, and I thank each of you. And I really bless each and every one of you for being a part of this particular show. It's been a blast.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason and Judy. It's been a pleasure to have you on. So you've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Stay tuned for another fascinating show next week with myself and Tim Beckley. So good night.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.